Supposed Bible contradiction. Was Jesus crucified in or outside of Jerusalem? Hebrews 13:12 notes that Jesus was taken outside of Jerusalem to be crucified. But in Luke 13:33, he says, "I must go on my way today and tomorrow, and the day following, for it cannot be that a prophet should perish outside of Jerusalem." Some non-Christians use this as evidence that Jesus made an error, since he didn't realize he would be crucified outside of the city. But this is not being charitable with the words of Jesus. First, the ESV renders this verse as away from Jerusalem, as the Greek word can mean outside, without, or away. So the verse could just be indicating that Jesus was not going to die away from the city of Jerusalem. But the context adds some important information. If we read what follows, we see, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it, how often would I have gathered your children together, as a hen gathers her brood under her wings? And you were not willing. Behold, your house is forsaken." We need to ask a simple question. Why is Jesus' statement in verse 33 interpreted as hyper-literal, but the following statements are not? Jerusalem is a city, and the city never literally killed or stoned anyone. It was the people in Jerusalem who did this. The city also didn't produce offspring, nor does the city have an official house. Obviously, Jesus is using metaphorical language throughout this passage. Given this, we should understand the term Jerusalem in this passage to not be referring to the physical city, but the religious authorities reigning there, who were often responsible for killing the prophets in the past, and in the absence of a king, were the unofficial leaders of Israel. In other words, a prophet cannot perish apart from the authority of the religious leaders in Jerusalem. Joel B. Green says, "The city serves as crucial socio-religious function for the narrator, who depicts it as a cultural center that embodies, legitimates, and propagates for the Jewish people its leading dispositions, ideas, practices, and institutions. That is, that performs a world-ordering function for the world Luke portrays. Jerusalem then stands as a cipher for Israel as a whole." Notice the context. Jesus is responding to the Pharisees' warning that Herod Antipas wants to kill him. Jesus responds by noting Herod cannot kill him, since he has to reach Jerusalem, and then he will be condemned to die. This reinforces the point that Jesus is talking about, how the religious leaders would condemn him to death, and that it would not be Herod who would be able to do that. In other words, Jesus is saying he cannot be condemned by anyone other than the Jewish leaders in Jerusalem. And this also doesn't mean that no prophet ever died in a different way. As Craig Keener says, that Jerusalem was prophets' only place of martyrdom was hyperbolic, but it was naturally the center of persecution in ancient Judah. As noted, Jesus was not speaking in a literal sense here, and after all, John the Baptist died in Galilee, which Luke was obviously aware of. Jesus' point about a prophet not perishing apart from Jerusalem refers to the judicial process, which was necessary for an execution to be carried out lawfully. They had the invested authority regarding condemnation to death. Herod was not given that authority in the law, and Jesus earlier confirmed that the Sanhedrin would condemn him to die. So the point is, for Jesus to die according to the scriptures, he had to be condemned by the religious authorities, who had the proper invested authority. So once we take this passage in context and recognize the hyperbole, we can see there is no reason to uncharitably interpret Jesus' comments. He is clearly referring to the religious leaders, condemning him to death instead of Herod. Thus, this supposed contradiction can be resolved.